This video contains content discussing violence, death, and murder. Viewer discretion advised.
The kidnapping of Polly Klaas was a tragic and high-profile case that occurred in 1993. Polly Hannah Klaas was a 12-year-old girl from Petaluma, California. On the night of October 1st, 1993, Polly was having a slumber party with two friends at her home. During the night, a man named Richard Allen Davis entered the house wielding a knife. Davis, a convicted felon with a history of criminal activities, abducted Polly Klaas from her bedroom. Despite the efforts of her friends and family to provide descriptions and information to law enforcement, Polly disappeared without a trace. The abduction led to a massive and nationwide search for Polly Klaas. The case gained significant media attention, and her parents, Mark Klaas and Eve Nicole, became advocates for child safety and victims' rights. The community rallied together, and the incident had a profound impact on public awareness of child abduction. Tragically, on December 3rd, 1993, about 2 months after her abduction, Polly's lifeless body was discovered in a wooded area not that far from her home. Richard Allen Davis was apprehended and eventually convicted of kidnapping and murdering Polly Klaas. The case had a lasting impact on how missing children cases are handled, and it contributed to changes in laws related to tracking and monitoring of convicted ex-offenders. Polly's parents, particularly her father, Mark Klaas, became vocal advocates for child safety and worked to establish the Klaas Kids Foundation, a not-for-profit organization dedicated to preventing crimes against children and assisting in the search for missing children. The Polly Klaas kidnapping case remains a tragic and influential chapter in the history of child abduction, underscoring the importance of community involvement, law enforcement collaboration, and advocacy for safety of children. Paula Hannah Klaas was born on January 3rd, 1981, in Fairfax, California, to Mark Klaas and Eve Nicole. Polly was a bright and lively 12-year-old girl who lived in Petaluma, California, with her family at the time of her abduction in 1993. Polly was a seventh grader at Kenilworth Junior High School. Described as a friendly and outgoing girl, Polly enjoyed spending time with her friends and had a passion for animals. She was known to be compassionate and caring, with a love for horses and a dream of becoming a veterinarian. The tragic events leading to Polly Klaas's abduction unfolded on the night of October 1st, 1993, during a slumber party she was hosting at her home. Richard Allen Davis, a criminal with a history of violence and criminal activities, broke into the Klaas residence armed with a knife. Davis kidnapped Polly from her bedroom in the presence of her friends. Following Polly's abduction, her parents, Mark Klaas and Eve Nicole, tirelessly advocated for her safe return. They, along with the community, participated in extensive search efforts and collaborated with law enforcement agents to raise awareness about Polly's case. Unfortunately, Polly's life was tragically cut short. Her body was discovered on December 3rd, 1993, in a wooded area not that far from her home. Richard Allen Davis was later apprehended, tried, and convicted of kidnapping and unaliving Polly Klaas. The case has had a profound impact on the nation, sparking conversations about child safety, the need for stronger laws to protect children, and the importance of community involvement in the face of such tragedies. In the aftermath of Polly's abduction and unaliving, her father, Mark Klaas, founded the Klaas Kids Foundation. The foundation is dedicated to child safety, providing resources for families, and assisting in the search for missing children. Mark Klaas also became a prominent advocate for victims' rights and legislations aimed at preventing crimes against children. The primary suspect in the Polly Klaas kidnapping and unaliving case was Richard Allen Davis. Davis, a career criminal with a history of violent offenses, was eventually arrested, tried, and convicted in connection with Polly's abduction and unaliving. He had an extensive criminal record that included burglary, assault, and kidnapping. Richard Allen Davis was initially apprehended on December 5th, 1993, after being linked to the crime through fingerprint and hair evidence found at the Klaas residence. Davis at the time was already known to law enforcement, having been in and out of prison multiple times throughout his life. During the investigation and trial, Davis admitted to abducting Polly from her home, and he provided details about the events surrounding her disappearance. He led authorities to the location where he had left Polly's body. Ultimately, Richard Allen Davis was convicted of first-degree murder and kidnapping in Polly Klaas's case. He was sentenced to death. However, his legal proceedings and appeals extended over many years. It's important to note that while Davis was the main suspect and the one held accountable for the crime, he acted alone in the abduction and murder of Polly Klaas. There was no other suspects directly implicated in the case, and Davis remains the sole perpetrator convicted for this tragic event. Richard Allen Davis, born on the 2nd of June 1954 in San Francisco, California, is a convicted murderer whose criminal history became widely known due to his involvement in the Polly Klaas case. Davis had a troubled life marked by criminal activities and a series of arrests and convictions. Davis grew up in California and had a troubled childhood. He was exposed, unfortunately, to a life of crime from an early age and became involved in various criminal activities. Throughout his adult life, Davis amassed an extensive criminal record. His offenses, including burglaries, assaults, and drug-related crimes, his criminal behavior led to multiple incarcerations. One of Davis's notable criminal acts prior to the Polly Klaas case was a 1976 kidnapping and assault conviction. He abducted a woman at knife point, leading to a prison sentence. However, he was released on parole after serving only half of the term he was convicted for. Davis's release on parole proved to be a critical factor in the Polly Klaas case. Despite his history of violence and criminal behavior, he was released back into society. On the night of October 1st, 1993, Davis entered the home of Polly Klaas during a slumber party, armed with a knife. He kidnapped the 12-year-old girl, leading to a nationwide search. Davis was then arrested on December 5th, 1993, after evidence, including fingerprint and hair, linked him to the crime. He then confessed to abducting Polly and provided details about the events surrounding her disappearance that only the perpetrator would know. Richard Allen Davis stood trial for kidnapping and unaliving Polly Klaas. In 1996, he was officially convicted of first-degree murder and kidnapping and was subsequently sentenced to the unaliving of Polly Klaas. Davis's legal proceedings and appeals extended over many years. He appealed his death sentence multiple times, contributing to a prolonged legal process. Richard Allen Davis remained on death row for several years. He passed away on February 18, 2021, while incarcerated at San Quentin State Prison. The cause of death was not publicly disclosed. Richard Allen Davis' criminal history and the Polly Klaas case highlighted the flaws in the criminal justice system, particularly in dealing with repeat offenders. The case also played a role in shaping discussions about parole policies and the treatment of individuals with a history of criminal activities. The Polly Klaas kidnapping case involved various pieces of evidence that played a crucial role in identifying the perpetrator and building a case against him. Here's just a summary of some of the key evidence involved in the case. Fingerprint and hair evidence. Fingerprint and hair evidence found at the Klaas residence linked Richard Allen Davis to the crime scene. This evidence was instrumental in identifying him as the perpetrator. Confession and details. Richard Allen Davis confessed to abducting Polly Klaas from her home. He also provided details about the events surrounding the kidnapping, leading investigators to the location where he had left Polly's body. Eyewitness testimony. Eyewitness accounts from Polly's friends who were present during the slumber party also helped provide descriptions of the suspect and contributed to the investigation and ultimate arrest of Richard Allen Davis. Search and recovery efforts. The discovery of Polly's body in a wooded area not far from her home provided important forensic evidence and helped to establish the timeline of events leading to her unfortunate unaliving. Criminal history of Richard Allen Davis. Davis's extensive criminal record, including previous convictions for violent crimes, was considered as evidence in his propensity for criminal behavior. Vehicle and location tracking. Information about Davis's movements and the vehicle he used around the time of the abduction was crucial in connecting him to the crime. Forensic analysis. A forensic analysis of the crime Polly's body and other relative items provided additional evidence to support the case against Richard Allen Davis. Polygraph test results. Davis underwent a polygraph test, commonly known as a lie detector test, during the investigation. While polygraph results are not always admissible in court, they can be used as a part of the investigative process. These pieces of evidence were collectively contributed to the identification, arrest, and conviction of Richard Allen Davis in the kidnapping of and unaliving of Polly Klaas. The case underscored the importance of forensic science, eyewitness accounts, and thorough investigative work in solving crimes of this nature.